Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for coming tonight, especially to the students who have been here since 5 o'clock for our mentoring program. So I want to give a special welcome to our panelists, Elle Ballard, the CEO of Women of the World Network. We also have Carolyn Barlerin, the CEO of Platypus Advisors, and Tania Estrada, who's the executive director of the Women's Building here in San Francisco. And we have a special guest from the Consulate General of Japan, Yasushi Noguchi. So if you want to give a wave, thank you for joining us. Okay, so let's give a round of applause for our panelists tonight.
Hi, everybody. Hello again. It's so nice to be here tonight. And before we even start, I want to wish everyone happy International Women's Day, all the women here in the audience. I remember celebrating this holiday growing up. It's lovely to be here. It's a great reason to be here tonight. So we're starting today our evening, the World Affairs Tonight, with this conversation. And my name is Elle. I'm the founder of Women of the World Network, community for multinational women in business. We support women with different programs for outreach in business, helping them with exposure, with influence. So we have different programs, including books, mentorship programs, and all of that in the community. So today's program host, World Affairs, is a San Francisco-based nonprofit, nonpartisan forum that explores international issues and global ideas, highlighting practices and solutions to some of our most pressing challenges. Tonight's program is co-hosted by the Women's Building, a local women-led community space that advocates self-determination, gender equality, and social justice, and Global Fund for Women, a funder of bold, ambitious, and expansive gender justice movements. Today, on International Women's Day, in the context of multi-layered threats to gender equality and women's rights, we are joined by the Executive Director of the Women's Building, Tania Estrada, and Caroline Barlerin, Board Director at Global Fund for Women, and CEO of Platypus Advisors, a team of social impact practitioners. Tania, Caroline, welcome.
Thank you.
Where do I start? Such a big topic that we are starting conversation on today. You know, growing up in, I'm originally from Kazakhstan, and I grew up in when it was part of the Soviet Union. And I feel like the world I'm living today is a little bit different, the world I grew up in, and not having a lot of resources, even sometimes bottled water. But of course, being a child, you don't notice that, you don't know that exists. But a lot of the, access to, discrimination, some of the discrimination that I've seen, but at the time didn't know that that's called discrimination, right? Or some of the opportunities and that are provided maybe for women and for men in families, parental responsibilities, shared parental responsibilities. That's close to my heart, myself and my sister. And I think when I was reading last time, I think only 3 countries in the world today provide, when it comes to parental opportunities, provide the most available care. And that's where I want to start with, right? And those countries, I think, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Estonia, I believe. Those are 3 countries. So with that, I wanna pose a question. What are the root causes of gender-based economic inequality? And let's see. How does economic inequality materialize in the Bay Area, the US, and the world at large? And first, I want to start with Tania.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here just with you all, so thank you for having me. I would say, I see it reflected into many areas. We start with, multi-generational poverty, racism, violence, the lack of housing, or the affordability of that, homelessness. And I think all of these issues are a result of um, inequalities, economic inequalities in the world, in the US, and in San Francisco. We are in San Francisco, and we have, two of the largest big companies in tech, right? Like Salesforce and Google are here. Yet we have, one of the highest rates of homelessness on sheltered, houseless folks. So look at that disparity. For me, it's just like when I came to the San Francisco area and look at all of this, I didn't know our programs were going to, continue for more than 10 years. The Women's Building provides food for 400 plus clients every week that can't have that at the table on a regular basis. 400 plus. Still, we're still talking about food, which is a basic, need for humanity in the place and area where there's a lot of, rich people, and inequalities, economically speaking. We didn't do that overnight. Definitely, we were talking about like, are we going to solve something tonight? So we were thinking about like, what can we? How can we? I think this conversation is a really good start, and we have to have more of this because it takes a lot of layers from different folks, from the institutions, nonprofits, foundations, people like us, to help our communities because they look like you and me, and they are part of the world that we live. And yet we haven't been able to find like the different layers and the help that we want to generate that result, right? So the lack of housing, the affordability of that's huge. And more people we see leaving San Francisco because they can't afford living in here. And that's a reality. And as I mentioned, like we didn't do this overnight. So it's going to take decades to also commit to this and intentionally, strategically, put efforts, money, and work into that. So thank you.
Thank you, Tania. And I want to pose the same question to Caroline as well. How does economic inequality materialize in the Bay Area, in the US, and the world at large?
So World Affairs Council, thank you for the opportunity. It's good to be with all of you all. Happy International Women's Day. And Elle and Tania, thank you for this opportunity to be in community with you. I think Tania covered a lot on the disparity of the Bay Area, which we can extrapolate across the United States. In the world, men make more money than women. That's a truth, majority of places. Women don't have the deciding power or are not often in positions of power to advocate for themselves or for each other. Does anyone want to guess how long it will take us to have global gender economic parity for women to be equal to men? Does anyone want to take a guess on how long that'll be? It's years, not minutes. It's centuries, not decades, but any guess? Anyone? 200 is a guess. Going once, going twice. 200. Higher, lower? Anyone else? 30 years. So 30 years, 200 years. So there's a range of how long it'll take to close the global gender gap, depending on if you use citations from the UN or from the World Economic Forum. But the belief is 132 years to 257 years is what it will take for us to close this gap. So we need to get started. We need to have these conversations. This is really, really critical. And it doesn't have to be this way. There's grassroots movements, there's women organizers, there's girls in marginalized communities organizing around the world for more rights and economic justice. And I have the good fortune of being on the board of Global Fund for Women, where we are investing in those movements and movement builders. of people who have the courage to have these tough conversations and do this work. It is International Women's Day. It also, the Commission on the Status of Women is having a conversation at the UN right now, and it's an annual gathering of changemakers who are looking at these issues. And Latania Matt-Frett, the CEO of Global Fund for Women, is there. She was one of only 2 civil society members to speak there this morning or give the comments. And so you all are stuck with me. I'm sorry. Latania is a much better speaker and much more engaging and much more informed. She wouldn't need notes. But these are conversations that we need to have at the Commission on the Status of Women. But I believe that women and girls are the answer. Mobilizing in revolutionary ways against harassment, discrimination, violence, and oppression. You know, look at what's going on with Iran. Look at these flashpoints of these different courageous movements, and we need to have these tough conversations around the role that movements can play in this work. And I can give more examples later, but I'm really excited about the opportunity to be in dialogue and shine a light on this topic with you this evening. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Yes, it's a big topic, and I thank you for sharing a light on that. 100 countries, wow. And the audience, thanks for participating. Those are big numbers, but I'm so glad that we're starting this conversation today and we're talking about this. You know, in the last 3 years, what we experienced as the world at large and as small businesses, big businesses, individual families, we all know, you know, we experienced this pandemic. And what we are talking about today, we actually went backwards when it comes to women inequality because of women, you know, a lot of women had to stay back at home, taking care of their kids, leaving their jobs, maybe leaving businesses and all of that, right? And this all happened. So unfortunately, we went, you know, backwards a little bit during these times, right? During this global pandemic. And we all heard about the interstate violence issues, the food scarcity Tania just talked about, and threats to human rights and legal protections. So what are the most significant barriers to accelerating women's economic participation and opportunity in 2023, in your opinion? Would you say, Tania?
So I think the world of work. I think that we need for economic, whenever you know, I talk and I reflect on economic equality, and then I see a room, a conference room in a work area full of men. I don't know if we're doing that justice, right? So I think the world of work, it's true, right? Like Caroline just said to us, like a fact, like men earn more than women. That's a fact. That's a reality. And we need to make sure to get there and to fight for our rights, because it's a right to earn the same. And, you know, it is a fact that sometimes care, like you mentioned, staying at home with the kids, it's underlooked and not recognized. It is needed. I'm not saying, I'm a mother of 2. It is needed, but it's underlooked and, you know, not recognized. And we have to count it. We have to take care of that. You know, there's a lot of jobs in the field in rural areas where the majority are women and girls. So they don't have access to the same opportunities in terms of education. We have to invest in education. If we invest in education in women and girls, you know, this economic disparity is going to change, because we will know our rights. We will know what it takes, and we want to see more people like us at the tables. We need to be there in the conversations and to include all of those voices in every decision that we take that is going to impact humanity. That's the truth.
Yeah, thank you, Tania. Yeah, I agree. I think there is more support needed from organizations, from government, right? From education, mentorship programs. There are so many ways today to provide, to get that income, to make. But I think it's an awareness. How many people actually know about those ways? You know, all of those things in place, I think, need to be in place. And I want to pose a question to Caroline. Did you want to add something to this, Caroline? Or
I think building off the the workplace for sure. There's the employer policies. So around the world, what the employer policies are is something we need to look at. There's also societal expectations of, oh, wait, you have 3 moms on the panel. Where are your children? And it's like, well, our children are home with another partner. Our children are, but if there were 3 men on the panel, it wouldn't be like, well, where are your children tonight? So there are societal expectations even in 2023. The legal environment, which looks very different in the different countries and different regions, and then the availability of the care infrastructure. So the idea of the care penalty, again, of Gloria Steinem said, the first 50 years was saying that women can do anything men can do, and the next 50 years is saying that men can do anything women can do, that women can go to work and men can stay home. So it's just figuring out the dynamic of how that will look. But for women, there is this care penalty or availability of a care infrastructure. So, and then this is all compounded, like you said, about in the pandemic, and also the geopolitical conflicts. That all of this going forward, when there's geopolitical conflict, thank you, World Affairs Council, for these important conversations, things can go backwards, or excuses of why it should go backwards because of that situation. So just adding a little color to that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Caroline.
And I'm gonna add,
Yeah.
just like talking about like just reflecting on this, like how many entities also are there in the world, right? Impeding their women to work. We don't have enough all of the entities. There's a lot, I would say like dozens of entities that are lacking policies around harassment in the workplace, let alone. Or, just like the diversity and inclusion, but really bring them together to the conversation, not only by photo, but by bringing the voices there, right?
100%, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. It's so many. So we take one topic, and there are so many different areas within one topic that we can stay here overnight and we'll not cover, right? But again, if we touch on technology specifically, when speaking about education and resources provided. And I wanna ask Caroline, how can technology be better used to increase women's access to financial products and services?
Well, I'll start again on the movement building, because movement building has looked different over the past 50 years, but feminist movements have been led to do egalitarian workplaces, regulations, more equitable land rights, better access to financial institutions, legal protections for domestic workers, which I want to talk more about, and protection from sexual harassment. And these movements, first of all, these movements are vastly underfunded. But these movements, when you look at Iran, there's online and offline. And so now the advocacy of movement building is something that needs to happen in community, in real life, in space, and then also how we amplify messages through social media, et cetera. So I think when you look at that question, I think guilty of being on the board of directors of Global Fund for Women, that I believe the answer is, these everyday women that are making change, that are change agents, that are saying there's a problem here I want to solve in my own community, and organization, I'm going to help solve it. Those women go to the women building to convene and collaborate, and then there's organizations there to start saying, okay, we're mad and we're a collective and we want to have conversations in real life, proximate to the problem. And also, wait a second, through technology, we can connect and see bright spots of other organizations. So, a Me Too movement learns from past movements. So how do we spark and have dialogue and take advantage of harnessing technology to make more good and make more connection? And there's also the technology that promotes and disseminates misinformation and is attacking and disenfranchising those things. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but I think that they're important conversations to have around that. So maybe add more.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking about technology, it helped enormously to connect the whole world, right? During pandemic, how we all connected, all the Zoom meetings, and I know a lot of people also zoomed out today. They want to meet in person and feel the energy too. I know we had a few meetings at Women of the World Network where we were able to add more women and to connect to more women in Europe and other countries. But definitely great conversation and to talk about and touch light on. I want to ask Tania, as we are speaking about this, what can be done to overcome these challenges and ensure lasting change to the systems and institutions in our society to benefit us
Small question
all?
for you, Tania.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, I think there's, I don't know if there's an answer to that. Like, to tell you the truth, I think like it takes a lot of layers and a lot of years and a lot of efforts from everyone in different levels and in different sectors to come together to intentionally put efforts in this issue that is going to either get bigger and, you know, awful, or it could be hopeful. And I bet to the hopeful part. And when I hear, you know, the technology, I also, because we live in San Francisco and because we have a lot of tech jobs, I wonder, like, you know, when I remember when I was in at the women's building in the community research room trying to understand like why the tech divide was so high, and in our women, why weren't they interested in technology? Was that the thing? They told me, right, like, it's not applicable to us. I don't want a tech job. I don't want to work, you know, coding. I don't want that. I want to use technology for what I want to use it. What do you want to use it for? I want to find recipes. I want to send a job application. I want to help. I want to see what my kids are on right now and help them and support them. So why are we not building programs around their needs? Because they are telling us what they need, and we're building programs over what we think they should know, because that will put them in a place where they can earn more, which is true, but it's not what they want. It's not what we want. And I just think that we have to honor their self-determination. And we have the job to empower that and to just provide the tools that they need, each one of them individually, with whatever we can in the many layers that we talk, so that they can really, you know, thrive. We don't want them to survive. I don't want our community to survive. I don't want to provide food pantry for all of the years to come, but to build more integral jobs or, you know, programs and opportunities for them to thrive. We have to have them, give them a path where they can actually thrive.
Yeah, I'm really animated by this concept of originally is designed for, so this paternalistic top-down dominating thing, and then design with, which is more of a co-design, which is, I think, is where we are, to design by. And a design by is really at the heart of the Global Fund for Women, of saying those closest to the problems need to be closest to the power. We're going to trust women and girls to advocate and tell us what they need on the ground for this work. You know, domestic workers in India, for example, during the pandemic, there was incredible isolation of losing your job and not being able to go and do your work, or you were trapped inside the house. And so the rights of these domestic workers in India were incredibly challenged during the pandemic, before and still. But India has an incredibly strong civil society, and looking at how technology, but not just the technology of what we expect technology in San Francisco, but just these different tools, how conversations started happening and sparking to say what is wrong and what are the rights and how do we educate and how do we mobilize and how do we connect to then start a domestic rights workers movement across India that Global Fund funds, because the domestic workers in India are saying this is what we need and this is what we're funding. And so hearing from people on the ground and everyday people who are doing this work is what we need to do. But it also needs more funding. So does anyone want to guess how much funding goes to grassroots women and girls around the world? I'm like the statistics of joy tonight. I apologize. Does anyone want to guess? Of all the funding in the world, like how much makes it to the grassroots women and girls globally? 10%. Thank you so much. You get a gold star twice for volunteering a number. 10%. Higher, lower? 0.5%. Thank you. Anyone else? 0.2. Okay. Only 1.9% of all funding makes it to the grassroots women and girls. And so this gender equality funding is also starting to trend downwards. So while the UN is saying this is really important and there's a lot of rhetoric around it, we're not seeing the evidence that this funding is happening. So again, a solution for why we need flexible, no strings attached funding here in our own backyard and also around the world.
And also, I think, thank you so much, Caroline. And I think also, it's a lot of work for a women, for a nonprofit, and for all of the nonprofits that are outside, not only the ones focused on women, but let's focus on that with the 1.9%, to put together a program where we go every 6 months over a cycle of application, right? So thinking about some of the things that you're doing, right? Like multi-year funding is something that we really need as a nonprofit. Yes. We don't want to set goals for a year. We want to set goals for 3. Let's start with that. Let's have multi-year funding so that we can really build on the curriculum that we have with the funds. If we don't have the funds, we have to go, that's what we did with many of our programs, especially with the pandemic, right? Okay, so let's go to this cycle. There's a lot of money also put into the cycles and the working behind that we could be concentrating into our communities. And that's because we need to go after the funding and go after the funding every year or every 4 months or every 6 months. It changes. And the fact that it's only 1.9 and also many only do 1 year, it limits us. So even if we want, it limits.
1.9. I'm still on that number, 1.9. Wow. So it's just beyond law. Anyway, thank you, ladies, and thank you, the audience, and thank you for this conversation. Just to have today. So I want to move on to the actionable solutions for intersectional economic equity. Growing up in country I grew up in Kazakhstan, women, both of my parents worked, but the society attitudes and norms were that women have first responsibilities in the family, being wives or being having kids, and then kind of work comes second and career comes second. Nothing wrong if woman herself chooses that, of course, but when society expects that, it's a little bit different. And when there is a situation where woman has to, or there is family changes where she has to go and provide for the family, and then there is this huge gap where she's been sitting, and not earning money. Maybe she's been taking care of the family. Economic inequality is not evenly distributed. So I wanna ask this, Tania. How do you develop and scale programs? In your opinion, how do you develop and scale programs that are inclusive and benefit women and people from all walks of life?
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I think we have to meet them where they are at to start with. I think we have them in different buckets of areas where we help them, right? We help this audience with this issue, but the truth is that we have to look at their walk of life. And what is it their struggles and what have been the barriers, and where is she at right now, so that we can really take in consideration their intersectionality. It's not only women, it's an immigrant women, a Spanish speaker that has lived, I don't know, like a tremendous life of violence in another country, that struggles with racism about, herself in many areas. And that is societally, we are the ones that are putting all of those barriers. So for me, it will be like, let's start with having, like, with meeting them where they are at. And, at the Women's Building, we meet them that way, culturally too. Women come to the building. We could be their first step, but definitely we're the last one in that journey of finding the resource that they want, that they need, to achieve their plan, right? So we meet them in Spanish. It's a safe place for everyone to be. And feeling safe, feeling heard in your own language, it's a lot of different. The language justice, we don't have that embedded. We are a very diverse city. But the truth is, we don't have a lot of translation services for many of our programs and for many of our clients. And we need to invest in that as well. Culturally sensitive programs matter to create a bigger and larger impact in those lives, in a larger scale. And I would say I will start with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Tania. Yeah, definitely great suggestions, great start. And I am myself an immigrant. I speak with an accent, and yeah, it's just a lot of things coming in, living in a new country, and learning and unlearning. And as being a woman, being a minority, definitely we need to share light and bring those programs forward. Caroline, I have a question for you. In your opinion, what role do financial institutions and the public sector and as individuals, play in promoting economic inclusion?
So that 1.9 number needs to change. And I think that is an opportunity for us to think about shifting power, and how do we shift power, and how do we decolonize wealth. And that's a conversation the Global Fund for Women has around the world with the changemakers that we partner with around the world. These are tough, important, courageous conversations of really speaking truth to power. And it's taken us a long time to get to where we are, and it'll take a long time, 132 to 257 years, to get to a new place. But it is figuring out how to make sure that, again, those on both sides of the table have language justice, are speaking in the first language with each other, are peers to each other. How do we shift the power and the dynamics of those that are receiving and those that are giving in a whole new way? And I think it's a really exciting time, because these conversations are happening in a new way. There's the Sustainable Development Goals. Some of us were talking about those earlier, but if you want to double click and get really into it, Sustainable Development Goal 5 is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And the 5.4, there's points and fours, but recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the promotion of public services, infrastructure, and social protection. So if you really are curious about diving deeper into these issues and really learning about them, go check out Sustainable Development Goal 5 and learn about all the points behind it, including our sisters who are doing domestic worker work in India, and the important work of 5.4. But shine a light on asking financial institutions in our own backyards and around the world, how are you thinking about gender equity? How are you thinking about gender parity? How are you thinking about these conversations? And how are you closing this gap? And financial institutions are very much on their heels of being required to answer these questions, because they're coming from their employees, they're coming from their investors. They're coming from their community and their customers. And that's exciting that people are voting with their feet, voting with their wallets, and asking the tough questions that we need to be asking of very local and very big institutions. We also vote with our feet and our wallets of where we decide to put our money and our time and our energy.
Yeah, thank you. Unpaid care. And yeah, I'm still on that 1.9 number as well. And 137.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.
1.9.
And 137 as well. Plus, but yeah, unpaid care, I think starting with families, right? Like in the families, having these conversations. If she or he, for that matter, take care of the children of family, the duties, it has to be paid. And that's where it starts in the family. Sometimes, a lot of the times it is assumed that it's a day-to-day work that has to be taken by him or her, but it's really, I think, starting there and having these open conversations and having this division and really paid. If one partner is working, the another partner staying at home has to be paid, right? And things like that. I think that's where it starts as well. So I want to move on to stories of change, and working and seeing women in corporate and then now working with women in business as well. I think women are motivated differently by different way that motivates. So I think understanding what motivates women in the first place is important. And what we are doing at Women of the World Network, we have 4 regions where we work with women in the first place. Most of our leaders are women. Most of our team members are women, so we give, and what I see is when women in leadership positions start leading, they bring us as women with them, and at the same time, women who are working or serving with a woman leader, she is seeing that as an example as well, and so she's motivated to also learn and grow and support her and develop with her, and personally grow with her as well. And I think that's an important thing to understand because it's a little bit different from the how maybe men, what men are motivated by, right? So I think understanding that will also open more doors as well to new understanding. And so I want to ask our amazing panelists, Tania and Caroline, can you share an example of a successful initiative or a program that has helped accelerate systemic progress towards equity?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that as you asked the question, and I think we have a lot of skills, all of us, and it is just a part, like a commitment portion that we have to invest and in women, right? When I was at the women's building and when I first started, I couldn't work. I used to live here in the Fillmore district, and I found the women's building, and I just fell in love with the mission. So I stayed there. I've been there for almost 10 years. I saw the community research room providing services for underrepresented women, mostly immigrant women, Spanish speakers, and there were a few volunteers, just a few. And we were doing job resumes, technology assistance. We just had launched our computer lab. We were doing preparation of taxes, and it was a few volunteers. And I thought about I can't work and here legally in the United States, but I can do volunteer work. And it's going to be time, but I have to make that time. Time exists, and sometimes I wish that they will have more hours, but and the fact, what I did is I started recruiting more volunteers. I thought it couldn't be only me that couldn't work, and that had skills to help these women with any assistance in the job area or connecting them to many resources in the community or so and so. So talking to the community and asking them what they want, the schedules that matter for them. We were open 1 to 5 p.m. Was that an accessible schedule? I don't know, but at that time it wasn't. So we had to open more schedules for people to come also in the morning and to expand this schedule in until 7 p.m. so that we can really offer more opportunities. And that's a lot on the staff and on the organizations to do, to be that flexible and to provide those hours that are actually creating the accessibility of the programs. We can have as many programs, but if we don't have that accessibility, I don't know what the impact is going to be. We went from having like 3 volunteers to having to recruit 100 volunteers every year for our different programs, from taxes to job to technology to the food pantry. And we grew the programs by 8-fold. And we have a lot of new programs, including the family unification program. Right now, we have a financial coaching program. We do the taxes for free for the community. We have a food pantry. We have advocacy. Having an integral view of what economic equality takes, it is including all of the things where your money gets lost. From food to building a resume, to printing it, to accessing all of these services. So yeah, I don't know if I I answered the question,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you did.
just like
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just building off of that, maybe a macro example and then a micro example. On the macro example, let's stay in India with those domestic workers. The movement of domestic workers in India is a huge contributor to the GDP of the country. Mm-hmm. So if we think about it, there's 67 million domestic workers globally, and 80% of them are women. So if we have an opportunity to, domestic work is a major sector for women's employment, and domestic workers for India is the largest sector for women for work. And so if we are able to harness the power of these women and these voices and give them the rights, it will change the GDP of India. So on a macro level, this is not about, we'll get to individual women, but just if you like your GDP of your country, leaders invest in women and invest in these movements. Because at 1.9, we're not going to get anywhere for the GDP of the country. I don't want to be all doom and gloom with all my numbers about how many years and all that stuff. I also have some good news. I bring you good news tonight, too, because I want to be invited back to more talks. Latania Mapfret, the CEO of Global Fund for Women, who's doing the remarkable talks at Commission Status of Women, so you're stuck with me, has launched a book today for International Women's Day called Everyday Feminist. Yay, Everyday Feminist. I have like one of the only copies that came out before today. So that was cool. Thank you, Latania. But this story, one of the stories in here is more of a hyperlocal story of Innocent in Nairobi, Kenya, and Innocent runs a hair salon, a beauty salon. That's a cool thing in itself, but Innocent is also a change maker and everyday feminist in her own right, just like women in the mission who are making these changes, doing these things, that she not only does that, but she also provides legal services, food, childcare services. And she, an hour after the beauty salon closes, is helping the next 100 refugees come in and figure out how to get the legal services and how to recruit and how to help with jobs and how to help with resources. She is doing this work every single day. And these change agents every single day are what makes the domestic workers movement in India, or makes the change agents in Kenya, or makes the change agents in San Francisco. Around the world, there are these everyday people with stories of just saying, wait a second, there's a problem in my own backyard. I guess I can't wait for someone else to come fix it. I'm going to go help mobilize volunteers. I'm going to help start figuring out how to make the change that I need and start telling these stories to each other. And so I'm really moved by that story of Innocent working direct counseling for women in situations of violence. Like she's a master recruiter who's done so much for everybody: food, schools, jobs, and helping these 100 refugees right there in this little salon in Nairobi, right here in our own backyard at the Women's Building. These things are happening, and that to me is really what brings me hope and encouragement for what we need to do, including telling everyone to invest more in women, girls, and movements. Darn it.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. Beautiful. And thank you for sharing all the numbers tonight with us. Just give it perspective. Yeah, and I think in the fact that we're starting this conversation, the fact that I'm so grateful I'm living today in this world today, where we actually putting light into this conversation, we're having this conversation. A lot of women building their beautiful businesses, building their beautiful families today with so many opportunities that they have today versus so many years ago. And of course, there is still a lot of work has to be done, but we are moving in the right direction, and it's just great for me to hear. And I love listening and hearing and seeing people like yourself, this organization, this beautiful organization dedicated this whole evening tonight. And thank you so much for having me to lead this session and this conversation to start with tonight. And thank you, Tania and Caroline. Should we open for questions? Yeah? Okay.
There's also probably experts in this audience that have things to share or solutions or want to explore things if there's bright spots of things people are seeing or thinking about.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Raylene. I am a co-founder of Latinas Talk Dinero, where we do a lot of financial literacy work with often women and Latinas, but a lot of first-gen students too. And I work at the Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley as my full-time role, where we're doing a lot of work in response to the recovery from COVID and the wage gap and all the things. And a lot of the conversations we've been having are really about like barriers to accessing programs. Like to your point, many of the Latinas who want to access our programs are working and are doing all of the things to stay afloat. And so I was curious to you both of maybe what strategies you all have to support women as they are needing services, but not necessarily having the support to access those services. So maybe exploring what are those barriers for maybe people who haven't thought about that and how you all are navigating them in your works.
Thank you. I think it's really interesting because it could be a variety, and we have seen them being even the accessibility of it, right? Like, can you come to the women's building wherever you are at? Can you, pay for it to come to get help? We have many stories where women have been brought by others in the bus, just like by hand, to go to the women's building so they get help, right? So just thinking out like that, I think about like, so then where that person was, where should I be so that others, so that others didn't need to do that, but the women's building. So sometimes it comes from, that accessibility, right? Like, how far it is and what time it is. Are we providing childcare for the moms, for them to be in the meetings and for them to don't worry about their kids only for 2 hours where they work with you on financial literacy and coaching so that they can, advance in that like independent economic movement that you are building, right? So I don't know, like I will ask the clients, I will ask them, what are their barriers? How can it be easier for them to access any of the programs? And that has been our approach, just asking the community really before putting something together, right? Like otherwise you will be testing, and testing is good, but if that testing is informed by the community, then you'll get better results faster.
Yes, a question. Did you want to add something?
No, I mean, I think +1 to everything. I think looking at Innocent as the beauty salon of being in the community, of the community, by the community, of figuring out how to be proximate, but also designing, having the people who are impacted designing the programs is where we need to go, which I know is a practice. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think we can all get better at that, at figuring out, testing the assumptions or challenging the privilege of perspective and making sure that you're asking the right people to design the programs that need the programs, how to do the programs, which is often bringing the programs to the community or the programs in the community. But then there are the barriers of transportation, childcare, all those things. the time, the language, the technology, the access. There's a lot of barriers, and so then it's figuring out how to prioritize those or test. Again, the local nail salon solution is not the solution in every country or every place, but it is showing that there's like a hyper-local solution that's proximate to the community. So that just resonated with me a lot.
Yeah, and then another thing I would say that in us, like the Women's Building have helped us a lot is having the representation of your clients in the team that you are putting together to help that community. When we get reflected in others, we feel safe. We feel they speak the same language like us. And it's not even the language, it's that cultural sensitivity and the approach. And we feel heard, and we are more empowered to do things because we trust. Trust also is, is something that we need to consider when, where we have a lot of phishing emails here, and you are, dead, expected someone to receive your email and answer within the 2 days frame or whatever. Like, I think that having represented staff or programming that helps the community is also something that sometimes we don't focus on a lot.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience tonight? Maya?
So I know y'all have talked a lot about the setbacks, about the numbers that can be disparaging, but looking at 2023 and moving forward, is there any silver lining or opportunity coming out of COVID, coming out of the crises in today's world? Something that gives you hope.
I think what I like to see, of course, I don't like what happened during global pandemic and so many people losing their loved ones, families, and business and everything. But I think what the good thing that happened is for us post-pandemic, I think a lot of women, myself including, go inward. And I think that's important because in the business of the everyday, it's important to ask right questions, but it's also important to go inward and realize what is it that I'm after at the end of the day? What is it that I truly want? And I think the whole spiritual growth of the world is that post-pandemic came out and about. I think I love seeing that. And because then we see and hear all the different unique voices that we haven't heard before, and it's a new world. And that's what I see with my work, what I do. See a lot of women that they want to open businesses, and whether it's outside of the full time or whether it's a complete transition or whether it's a new business, giving her resources. In this new world that's where technology is more prevalent and available, and additional resources that we have access to as well. So that's what I like seeing now, and encourage going forward for women as well.
There are everyday change makers in every community around the world that are solving problems. And during COVID, had to get even more resourceful and resilient on how to solve them. And those create the Black Lives Matter. Those create, the Me Unis, Mimos, like the different movements that are transforming and changing the dialogue, transforming the conversation, shining light and putting pressure on the powers that be on what needs to happen. And so I think that our patience grew deeper and stronger, and also got limited and less during COVID. I think it was a quarter case on both sides. Our hope got stronger and better, and also got diminished. And so I think we hold those corner cases of the distortion of the pandemic, of the pandemics that were occurring, to go and find the bright spots, go and find the change makers, and then broken record, invest in them to make the change happen in your own backyard, and then put pressure around the world on how to do that and shine a light on those conversations. So to me, there's a lot of hope. And there's a lot of resilience and a lot of building and creativity and courage that I see. I get a front row seat on the Global Fund for Women to do that work.
And I think for me, you know what? Before coming here, I was sharing with Caroline and Elle that I went to the women's building and we put together, and I said we, but my staff really put together an event for women, a resource fair. And they wanted it to do it today with many efforts. We had great turnout and a lot of women-focused organizations. What gives me hope is knowing that we are not alone. We are doing this change, you know, with many others together. So when I, you know, just went to the women's building and to this fair, just knowing that we have a huge force coming along with us, fighting for the same issues, and a building full of other organizations doing, you know, different areas of focus for the same mission, I like that. That gives me hope.
Thank you. Anybody else before we close? Anyone else? Any comments, maybe? Yeah.
Hello. I did have a question prompted from the last exchange on the pandemic, and I think one of the lasting things that I see is the use of technology, and if you're seeing the ability thus far, or if you have ideas looking forward for leveraging technology in this effort, and then separate or perhaps related, any ideas for folks who may not be specifically involved in the movement, but who are interested in partnering, or even everyday efforts that folks in this audience can engage in to support the effort.
I mean, I definitely think that if everyone engage with a women's organization, that's a good first step, right? Like, engage with, and that's one of the things that I always say, like, it's not about the women's building. Any mission that you are passionate about, consider getting involved and getting engaged and learning more about that so that you are part of the conversation, right? And that solution and all of those ideas. And so, yeah, and then on the other side, technology, for instance, like, I think it's just like, again, different levels, you know, very large campaigns and all of that, and then just coming together to do this on a regular basis, to really provide, you know, right now we have a mobile lab. So during the pandemic, we had to close our computer lab because of the proximity of our clients. So we couldn't have that. We didn't have enough space for our clients to sit next to each other to maintain that. So we had to provide all of those computers to the staff so that they could work from home. Now we don't have computers, so we raise funds to do, you know, mobile lab. And then right now we're doing the taxes for free for the community with that. Every Thursday, every Saturday morning, you know, again, like accessibility and availability of all of that. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'd invite the audience just to imagine what type of social change or transformation we could have if these everyday change makers were resourced. And so, I mean, you're having an opportunity in front row seat right here to learn more about the Women's Building if you don't know about it, learn more about World Affairs Council if you don't know about it, learn about great organization that Elle has if you don't know about it, check out the Global Fund for Women, and also check out each other's organizations. But around us is a bright light of constellations of change and things happening from everyday unsung people who are under-resourced that could be resourced more, and taking a bet on them. Using technology to amplify those voices, the unheard voices, and also putting pressure on the powers that be to look at Sustainable Development Goal 5 and ask the questions and tough questions on how do we close that to be in the next 10 years or 100 years, for goodness sakes, less time. So there are different elevations of things we can do, but my mantra the past 3 years is an object in motion stays in motion. So just put a foot in front of the other and keep seeing how to do it in dialogue and in community with each other.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree completely. And conversations that matter. Just joining the conversation, that's where it starts. Just having this conversation. I think it matters a lot. And joining organizations and really sharing your voice when it comes to this, right? Because everybody's voice, everybody's opinion matters. And so where you stand, because that will in turn inspire other women to join forces together and men as well, so that we can keep moving forward. And with that, I think I want to thank you, our panelists again, Caroline and Tania. Thank you for participating, and thank you for inviting me, Maya, to be part of this amazing night tonight. It's my honor and pleasure to be here. And if you, everyone wants to learn more about World Affairs, head to the website, www.worldaffairs.org. And I think you guys have an event on March 23rd with the U.S. Ambassador, and you can learn more on the website about those programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you.